Fox News Channel.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly in the Unresolved Problems segment tonight. Legalizing hard drugs. Polls say most Americans are against it, but increasingly the drumbeat of legalization is being heard. Joining us now from Los Angeles is Judge James Gray, who works in the Orange County Superior Court. Judge Gray has written a book called Why Our Drug Laws Have Failed and What We Can Do About It, a judicial indictment on the war on drugs. Okay, Judge, I'm putting you in charge of, you're the new drug czar with unlimited powers. What do you do?
Well, first of all, hello, Bill. If I were the drug czar, I would advocate letting each state decide what to do with regard to this critical issue, invoke the concept of federalism and get the federal government out of the equation, except to allow them to help each state enforce its own rules.
All right, so then maybe you have one state that has everything legal, and then another state next door that has everything not legal, and then you have all these people driving cars going into the state where it is legal. We want that. Does that make sense?
Well, Bill, first of all, I've read your book in preparation for being with you today, and you fall into a couple of traps. I think you make some very valid points, but one of them is that you don't make a distinction between users on the one hand and addicts on another, and you also don't make a distinction between people whose drug use harms others as opposed to only themselves. So if anybody is going to drive a motor vehicle under the influence of any of these drugs in my state or anywhere else, that's a crime. Hold them accountable for it.
All right, but I'm proactive rather than reactive, and I want, first of all, I think it's impossible to follow somebody around and know what kind of damage they do to their children, for example, behind closed door when they're intoxicated. You can't know. We do know that 70% of all child abuse is substance abuse driven. We know that. So to me, I want to control the demand for the drug. And as I'm flattered you read my book, but as you know, in my book, I'm for coerced drug rehab, which is you force people who come into the criminal system with drugs in their bloodstream, which is now about 65% of them, you force them into rehab for a good period of time, taking the market away. But you, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, want the government in some form to distribute drugs to these people.
Well, what I want is to have people held accountable for their conduct. You must realize we've got to get real on this because we have tried to incarcerate ourselves out of this problem now for 30 years. We have more people incarcerated in our country than anywhere in the world. So we simply cannot do what you suggest. We have somewhere on the order of 20 million people that regularly use these various drugs, and we certainly cannot incarcerate them.
Well,
what we must do, well, but wait a minute, because what you can do, and I've done this in my court for a long time with regard to alcohol, you can find the problem users who will find their way into our courts. And that's where they should be, and we should hold them accountable, like drawing the distinction, for example, that this actor Robert Downey Jr., it makes as much sense to put him in any jail as it would have Betty Ford for her alcohol
abuse. All right, I agree with you that Robert Downey Jr. does not seem to be a threat to society, and I would probably do what they did, put him in a residential treatment center. But you're wrong in the fact that we could easily have coerced mandatory drug treatment. Would just be taking resources out of the criminal system and putting it into the other system. Alabama does it, and they do it very effectively. And Singapore does it, and they do it very effectively. But let me pose this question to you. You, again, are reacting. So you're allowing the narcotics to come in and be distributed. And then if somebody does something wrong, you take care of them. I'm telling you that the social problems that stem from intoxication are enormous, that we are paying a tremendous price as a society, and that we've got to stop those social problems before they happen.
Okay. Bill, you're right, but we have to understand that we only have so many resources. We have these drugs in our society. They're going to be here, like it or not. We have a choice. We can either have drugs in our society with drug lords or without drug lords. And we have enormous problems with regard to drug prohibition. We have made these drugs so ridiculously lucrative that we have corruption at an unheard of rate.
How would it work, though? How would your plan work? How would your plan work? Would you have addicts register and then they would get crack and heroin? How would it work?
Okay. Bill, I'm not the king of California, although King James does have a certain ring to it. But each state will try something different. We will all gravitate toward what works. What we have to do is to legitimize the discussion and allow each state to do what is right for its people.
Chaos.
Oh, absolutely not.
And let me give you an example, and then you can reply. Baltimore, the city of Baltimore, tried a very liberal, lenient, what they called it was a therapeutic approach to their drug problem. Whereas here in New York, We had the mandatory Rockefeller laws. Crime in New York, drug crime and all other crimes have plummeted, okay? Way, way down. In Baltimore, with the therapeutic, easy, soft approach, they have 6 times the murder rate that we have in New York. Their crime has gone straight up and sky high right now.
What has also happened is in San Francisco, where they have a more liberal medical approach, they have lower crime rates than New York does.
And you can't walk the streets. You can't walk the streets in San Francisco without being panhandled and watch people all over the place.
Okay, don't get excited, because we need to get a grip on these sorts of things without getting that emotional.
Listen.
You've tried your way, and it hasn't worked.
No, you haven't tried my way. You haven't tried to coerce drug rehab.
We only have so many resources. What you have to do is utilize the drug treatment for the harmful drug users, the people who do cause the problems. You understand that about 95% of all spousal abuse cases are alcohol-related. What are you going to do? Are you going to make alcohol illegal?
Substance
exactly
abuse
the same
related.
thing.
It's not just alcohol. It's substance abuse related, because they're all lumped in there.
Okay.
Now, but look, Judge, you just gave a good example, and I'm going to give you the last word on this. We had about 90 seconds left. San Francisco, very lenient, very lax. And you're pointing to that as an effective, and I'm saying the quality of life for people who live in San Francisco has plummeted. They got these people all over the place. They panhandle. Because once you're into the intoxication mode and the government's giving it to you, you're going to stay stoned all the time. This is not what we need in this society.
We've got to get more of a managerial approach to this than the emotion that you're talking about. You are somehow implying that I don't care if people use these drugs, which is absolutely wrong.
I think you care. I think you're wrong.
You know, there are options. Well, let me talk about this, because we do have options at our disposal. In my book, I spend a great deal of time talking about options that are working very well. For example, in Switzerland, where they get heavy-using addicts, they have a medicalized approach, they take the addicts away from the criminal element, they're able to be employed, their health is better, they're paying their taxes. It's working famously in Switzerland.
I don't know about that. But look, we don't have time to debate the Swiss experiment. It's a very controversial one.
It is not, Bill. The Swiss voted more than 70% to keep it. And if you are trying to say that the Swiss care about their children and their people less than we do, of course, that isn't true.
All right.
So
Judge,
realize that we've got options.
I'm going to leave it there. And I'm going to let people encourage them to read your book. They can read my book, and then they can make up their own mind. I just will say that...
talk about it more.
Yeah, we will. And Switzerland's a lot easier to manage than the United States is. But, Judge, we appreciate your point of view. Thanks very much. And next, the latest reality television craze, taking Americans to the scariest places on Earth. Does that include the Factor Studio?